Okay, looks like everything is ready to go. Make sure we get a really sharp focus this week. It's not looking too bad right now. I think we can do a little better. All right, that's looking pretty good. Okay, I see we got a few people have joined in and are ready to paint. Just gonna say hello to everybody, and hope everybody is excited to get painting. If you have any questions as we're going through, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute and say hello. And happy to have questions for sure. I guess the first question is, where's the video from last week? There was a bit of an audio issue. Last week the audio didn't record. I was planning to re-record it this week, but then there was a fire in the building, so I couldn't do any of that stuff. So the second video, which is the guy we did last time, that dude, I'll paint him again tomorrow. So video number 2 will go up probably around the same time as video number 3 does. And number 3 is this lady, this vampire. And yeah, so the general idea this time is we're going to, there's a couple of different things I want to work on. The first one is going to be kind of cold, undead looking skin. We're going to be painting white. We're going to paint her clothing white, and a white is something that people find a bit of a challenge. White's not too difficult if you give the paint a good foundation. So you build the white paint up on a foundation. And then the final thing is we're going to give her a creepy object source lighting effect. We're going to give her like a back glow, like some sort of nefarious light colors coming at her from one side. So here's the mock-up model that I did. There she is. So we've got that white cloth, the creepy undead looking skin, and then may not show up the greatest on your cameras, but there's like a blue lighting glow coming at her from the back that backlights her, and we're going to do that as well at the end of the class. That's not too difficult to do. All right, so that's the plan. And if you have any questions, just let me know. The paint list for today, I see Owl Instruments has asked about that. I will drop that into the chat right now. Just bear in mind that you don't have to have the exact same paints. Just something similar is going to get you there. I'll just remind people that the paints for the class each day, I try to post them in advance of the class. It was a little bit late today because I was testing out the sound and everything, but generally speaking, the list of paints we're going to use is going to be listed about an hour before the class starts if you want to see that in advance. And I'll try to remember to post it in the chat an hour before the class as well. If there's anybody who's looking for it before the class starts, remind me in the chat and I'll drop the list in the chat. So yeah, it doesn't have to be the exact same paints. You just need something that's going to give you the same general idea. Right, so that was a list of paints. That was the sample model in green. And here's another version of similar idea. So there's our vampire lady. And she's got a kind of a red glowing color lighting her up from the back. The camera kind of washes out this color. It looks quite a bit more striking in person. And I haven't really decided which color I want to use for that. I got 3 ideas in mind. I've got Phantom Glow, Red Neon Glow, and Blood Red from Reaper. These are all good possibilities for this kind of thing. Phantom Glow is what I used for the demo model, but you could use a color like Surf Aqua, Platypus Teal. Actually, I really like that new Platypus Teal color. It's almost the same color. It's a very rich color. That's one of the Reaper washes, the super washes. In any case, that's the general idea. So what we're going to do, we'll start out, we're going to build our skin. We'll paint the skin first. So what I'm going to use for the skin, I've got Reaper's Burgundy Wine. That's going to be our shadow color for the skin. I've got the Reaper Undead Skin Triad. You don't have to use these exact same ones, of course. Any kind of gray color with a little bit of dark green added to it is going to give you the same effect. So I'm going to use that triad, and for the highlights in the skin, I'm going to use Reaper's Creamy Ivory. So that's our sequence for the skin right there. And as usual, when I build my palette, to make sure I can keep manage the colors, I start with the dark on the left and work my way across to the right. So there's a big old dollop of Burgundy Wine in the palette, and then I'm just going to add each color across the top as I go. It's been absolutely quiet here in the studio all day until about, I don't know, 3 minutes ago when somebody decided to start moving furniture or something in the next room. Unfortunately, I have no control over that, so I apologize for the background noise.
Geoff, that Undead Skin Triad, is that part of the MSP line,
Yep.
or is it,
It's literally called Undead Skin. Don't remember what the
what's
numbers are.
one?
Mine are like
Oh, okay.
worn off. I think it's called like what is it called? Ghoul Skin, maybe, is one of them. Let me look it up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah,
But
okay, I can find that one.
it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't have to actually match that. But you know, if you just use gray and add a bit of green into it, you'll get the same sort of effect. Let's see. Undead Skin. Oh yeah, so it's called Undead Skin Tones, and the dark one is Ghoul Skin 9148. Then it's Moldy Skin 9149, Bloodless Skin 9150. That's the triad. And
Thanks, I found them.
there's another triad which is lighter than that as well. And if you have the Flesh of the Damned Fast palette, that's got these three paints are the lower three paints in that pack as well. All right, and then I'm going to put Creamy Ivory in there as my highlight color. And while we're at it, I might as well build the colors for the cloth. I'm going to use black indigo for the shadow color on that. This is for the white cloth, so I'll put that at the bottom. The reason I like black indigo for this is it's got a bit of a blue tone to it. The indigo. Then I'm going to use stone gray for my mid-tone, which I know doesn't sound very much like it's building a white color, but it's going to give us an interesting white. I'm going to use snow shadow. And then we're going to use weathered stone. And this is how we get the foundation for our white cloth, right? Give it a good solid foundation, and then I'm going to use solid white, but it doesn't really matter what white you use. Pure white, dragon white. We'll try to stay on the cold side rather than the warm side, because we got a warm white as our highlight for the skin. We're also going to use this for the center of the object source lighting, so you can give yourself a spare dollop of that. And then I'm going to need, I think, just a touch of red for one part of the skin tone. So there we go, just a little bit of red up there. And what was the other thing I was going to do? Oh yeah, I have a purple here. And this purple is just in case I get in the mood that I want to um, do a little bit slightly different shading on the skin. So I got a purple there. You could use like Imperial Purple, Royal Purple, uh, Night Sky Indigo. This one's Violet Light. Just any kind of mid-range sort of purple color. I'm kind of fond of that. What's that triad called? It's called Evening Purples Triad, I think. Kind of like that one. Have I got everything I need? The last thing we're going to need is going to be our color for the lighting effect. And to make that work, we're going to need black. So we'll get a dollop of black right in the middle. And I think that's everything we need until we make a decision about what our light color is going to be. And when the time comes, you're going to be able to use whatever light color you want. You don't have to match what I do. And yeah, so those are the same colors that I had listed in that sheet of paint that I just posted. And I'm going to actually switch back to that for a moment. And I'm going to go see if I can sort out this noise next to me and get these people to be quiet for a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, let's get this show back on the road. Any questions before we start? Okay, cool. This model has quite a few sort of smaller features on it, like her hands are quite small, her facial features are quite small, she's got a little necklace on there. So I'm going to use a relatively small brush. I think I used this last time too. It's the Da Vinci. It's a round size 1. It's not a very big brush. And I've got a smaller brush on hand for some of those details if I need them. Main thing today is not so much that you need a particularly small brush or a big brush, but for doing some of those final details or fine details, one with a good point is going to be a bit useful, especially when we're going to do their eyes. Okay, and now we can start painting. So, first question to ask is, which way are we going to do our light source? And we have a couple of different options. And I'm always thinking in terms of what is the final lighting effect that I'm going to try to achieve going to look like? What direction is it going to come from? So the kind of the coolest direction for looking at this model is about like that, right? That's kind of like the hero direction. So we could do a thing where she's like lit from the left, from our left, her right. So the main light direction is on that side. And then we're going to do her eye so she's looking that way. So she's actually going to be looking in a different direction than her face is pointing. And then I think we'll do that lighting effect as so there's something kind of down here which is lighting her up. So it's going to hit there. It's going to maybe hit a little bit on her leg right in there. That boot, bit on her shoulder, that bit of her chest along there. Her face, her hair on that side. So the off light is going to be this way. And I want to make sure that my main light is opposite from that. So one of the tricks I've used over the years is actually to mark that right on the base where I want that lighting direction to be. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to grab a little bit of white paint on my brush. And what I had decided just a minute ago, right, there's that knee, and there's that bit of cloth. I want the secondary light source to be able to hit that. So this right about there is the position of my secondary light source. So I'm going to make the main light source pretty close to opposite to that. Now if I go directly opposite, that actually puts it back here somewhere. So it'll be shining on the back of her head. I don't really want that, so I'm going to bring it forward until that light would just be shining on the other side of her body. Right? So it's going to catch her arm, it'll catch this hip, it'll catch that bit of cloth. So I want this light in around there. Okay, so there's my markers to remind me what I had planned. Nothing too complicated there. And if we look at it, so the light coming from the main direction is like that. Just a bit of her face is going to get caught with that. And from the opposite direction, there's the angle. So there's just going to be a little bit of light catching those shapes from underneath. And I think we'll make them opposite on angle as well. So the low light will be on the ground about maybe an inch or two off the side. Sorry, I got to mute for a second. There we go. Lots of noises coming in today. Yeah, so the light source on this side will be about an inch off the base down here somewhere. And the light source here is going to be about coming from about an inch above her shoulder, somewhere up around there. Okay. There's our general idea. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a shadow on the skin and on the cloth. So let's start with the skin, and we'll use the same color on her hair as we're going to use on the skin. So I'm going to grab this straight burgundy wine color, which in your palette probably looks kind of like a deep red, but it's going to dry quite a bit darker than that on the Mini. And as usual, I'm not using my main source of paint. I'm moving that off to the side so that I can work with it. And I'm going to make my mixes along here that I can go back and adjust them using my little reservoir of paint that I made. I'm going to reorient the Mini so I get a better idea. And then there we go. So I'll start on her leg. And so the light's there, so everything that light will not directly hit, I'm going to paint this color on her skin. So that's all of that skin in that shadow area along the side of her knee. And basically that half of her thigh there is going to get this color. This cloth is going to cast a shadow against that leg. So I'm going to put this on the inside of her leg. Okay, where that cloth is going to create that shadow. The boot is going to have a shadow around where it touches the skin, and the same thing is going to be up here near this hemline. Like that. Okay, and I'm going to treat these legs as though they're bare. Okay, just so we have some more skin tone to play with. This piece of cloth where it touches the leg, that's going to have a very small shadow in there as well, so we'll paint one in. Same thing along there, and under here it's going to have a shadow. Okay, there's her hand. We'll paint under her hand like that. And we're going to keep going kind of clockwise around the Mini. So our light source now we got to remember is on, oh, so her hand's got a big glove on it, so we don't need to do much skin tone on the hand. So I'll make my, that's basically that part of it done. So I'll go up, because there's no skin showing on the back here. Okay. Now if we wanted to, we could make this a transparent cloth, but that's not the aim today. Today we're going to be doing a sideways lighting effect. So up around her chest, the light is high on that side, so there's going to be a shadow under her hair on that part of her chest. This little necklace is going to cast a shadow. Remember I said we were going to do this color as the shadow color on the hair as well. So anywhere that the light wouldn't hit around the hair is going to get this color. We're going to put that in the eye sockets as well, both eye sockets. And then continue around her face along that hairline. This side of her face is going to be almost all in shadow, so I'll put that in shadow. Under her nose, the side of her nose will be in shadow. Put this color over her whole lips. Give us a nice foundation for a lip color later. And then basically that whole side of her face in there along the hairline is going to be in shadow. Like that. So let's go down the side here. So right there, that part of her chest is going to be getting direct light, but this part of her chest under here, a bit of cleavage. There's going to be a bit of a shadow there, and probably along the side of that piece of cloth as well. Okay, let's do the arms. There's this, her left arm is definitely going to have a shadow underneath it there. And I don't think this whole arm is going to be hit by the light from that direction at all. But that feels like it's probably going to be too much shadow. So I think I'm just going to leave a bit of the top of her arm out of the shadow. But the rest of the arm from this perspective, I'm going to give that shadow color. And there's a bit of her hair there. Where the hair goes down along the side of her chest, we'll get that as well. There, like that. Okay. Well, that's the front. We could do the part in her hair as well, I think. Okay. For her other arm, for her right arm, there's going to be a shadow. So this is going to be quite a bright highlight of skin on top of her shoulder, but everything underneath is going to be out of the direct line of light. So we'll paint that all burgundy wine. As you can see it drying now, you can see how dark this color gets. And then there'll be a shadow where her hair lays across the skin on her shoulder. Do a little bit around like that. And then, so she's got this dress on her chest, and that dress comes around and it goes up the back in here. But in her armpit, okay, at the back of her armpit, that's going to be skin and burgundy wine as well. And then there'll be a shadow where the glove touches that arm, and that shadow will actually go all the way around. Okay, and then we need to make sure we do the back bottom half of that arm, like that. Now the light coming this way is not going to hit the back of this arm at all. So we're going to paint the whole skin area of that arm underneath there. It's going to be burgundy wine. Along the edge of the glove, right up along the hairline. Remember I said we were going to leave this little patch a little bit lit up. So we'll do the burgundy wine all around that, but leave that unpainted. There's the hair. The hair is going to be in shadow on this side, so we'll paint that whole side of the hair this color. All the way around. Right down along her back. On the inside in there. Wow, I'm jumping all over the place today. And this part of the hair in here, actually, I think it looks like a bit of her back skin is showing right there. So let's put a burgundy wine line around that. And then put a shadow of burgundy wine on the bottom of her hair. There we go. Now I hear you out there saying, but Geoff, you said that there was going to be a backlighting effect, and you've just painted the whole backlight side in the darkest shadow color. And that's correct. We've done that because we're going to paint the lit side first, and then we're going to go back and bring up the highlights and create illumination on the shadow, within the shadow, on the shadow side of the mini. That's the general idea. So just wait a moment and kind of slowly rotate her around. If you have any questions about what I did or did not paint, please don't hesitate to ask. The intent is that other people watching along might be able to learn from your questions as well. I think I mentioned before, but once we get this process smoothed out, we'll have students in the studio live at the same time as we're doing this class live streamed. I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be my favorite kind of painting anarchy. Okay. Next thing we're going to do, we are going to go down to our indigo. And we're going to do the same thing in the areas that are cloth. And we'll do this to give the burgundy wine time to dry. And once we start doing the skin tone highlights, that part's going to go very, very quick. So, light direction that way. Again, anything which is basically the light is going to shine directly towards it, we don't need to paint this. Anything the light's not going to hit is going to get this shadow color. So we can see like this piece here blocks the light, so the entire inside of that is going to be this indigo color, or whatever you're using for black. If you don't have an indigo, you could just take like the dragon black, for example, and mix a bit of a dark blue into it. That would have the same effect, or similar effect anyway. So
Is that
anywhere.
nightmare black, kind of that same thing?
No,
Geoff?
don't use nightmare black. It's all right. Nightmare black is it works a bit like a contrast paint. It has different properties when it separates out. So I would avoid using the nightmare black. But yeah, we need, so that nightmare black is little bit less opaque. Okay, and the idea is that by adding the blue into the black, you're cooling it, and the blue gives the perception that the black is further away. I'm not familiar with the corporeal shadow color, but I'll do a quick check and I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's like ultramarine shadow, maybe with a little black or something.
Yeah, I would go the other way. Black with a bit of ultramarine shadow.
Okay.
Yeah, more black than blue. And what's that other one? Corporeal shadow. Let's look that one up. That's not what I'm familiar with. Corporeal shadow. That's a paint? The corporeal shadow is a paint? I just looked it up. It's a bluish black. Okay, then it should work. As long as it's not one of the speed washes or something like that, it'll work. We're not looking for a paint with transparent properties. We're looking for an opaque paint. Wow, an opaque paint. 0685. Yeah, I just looked it up and it didn't come up. Try it again. No, it must be out of stock. Or is it 909685?
It's one of the Reaper Con special paints.
Yeah, okay, so you don't want to use that one then. That's not going to work. Those special paints that they give out at ReaperCon were the speed washes. And so they're not going to work for this. You want something that's quite opaque. So your best bet is something like solid black or dragon black. Nightshade purple is another good one. Blue liner would work. You need something quite opaque and just add a bit of blue into it, like a bit of the what's this one called? Ritterlich blue is a good one. It's a nice dark blue, right? Mix something like that into the black, and the idea is that blue will make the black. Your brain will perceive it as being darker. Okay. But yeah, the speed washes are not really suitable for this because they're meant to separate out and leave the highlights visible. And what we're doing right now is the opposite. We're making sure that the shadows are perfectly dark.
Sorry, I sort of misspoke. It's from an old Reaper Con. It's not a.
Oh, it's not one of the recent ones? Okay. Okay, then if it's the best way to tell is just put it on your palette, spread it out, and see what it looks like. And if it's nice and dark when you spread it out, it should work. Okay, so our light direction is like that. So the side of her leg in here is not going to be getting the light directly, so we're going to make that black. The underside of this arm, same deal. I'll rotate it so I get a better brush stroke. You get a little bit of this on the burgundy wine at this stage, doesn't matter. The idea is that they're both going to be so dark that we get a good contrast with the areas of skin tone that we are going to try to make lighter. So side of her boot. Yeah, sorry about that. I misunderstood what you're saying. I thought you were talking about one of the paints that they just put out this year, which are they're the speed washes, right? Although I really like the platypus teal, that particular speed wash I really like. All right, so so I did the side of her boot there, the side of the cloth on her little skirt, side of the cloth under her, where she's got her skirt lifted by her arm, and then I'm going to start looking at her torso here. I can see like where those two pieces of cloth meet. Oh, sorry, I keep drifting. There'd be a dark line where those two meet, and there'll be a shadow under this part of her little corset, and right in there where the corset kind of splits at the front. We want to do this under all of the zipper, not what it would be like lacing. So we'll make that dark. I think with the light coming this way, this part of her chest is going to be basically not, I probably did too much. It's going to have a rounder highlight on that side facing the top. Same thing on the other side of her chest. It's going to have a smaller highlight, but pointing towards the light direction. And then this whole side is going to have a shadow cast by that part of her chest. Same there. And then as I work my way down, with the light coming this way, basically this part of her stomach is going to be lit, but I'm going to have a dark shadow basically around her stomach on that right hand side. And then everything else beyond that on her cloth is going to be in the shadows. So we'll do that on her right glove from our perspective. From hers it's the left glove. We'll do that. When I look at this flap of cloth in here, it looks like the light will catch it a bit there. So for now, we'll just paint the whole thing dark on the inside. And then we'll paint it dark underneath, under here. Paint all of that. Now I'm looking at her arm. As we said before, the arm is not going to get direct light, so we're going to put all of that in shadow. Now just because it's not going to get direct light doesn't mean we're not going to highlight it. There's going to be some highlight on it regardless, but we're not going to make it as light as the side facing the light source, the main light source. So just to kind of refresh the general idea, remember we're going to do a primary light source first, coming from above to her right shoulder, and at the end we're going to go back in and add a secondary light source coming from down below her left hip. So as I look at the light coming this way, looking at her backside, that light might catch up in this area a bit, but below around kind of her buttock there, it's going to be dark. This little area in here might get a bit of light, so I'll leave that a little bit more exposed. This part of her dress is definitely going to catch light coming down that way, so we won't make this too dark. Sort of where it flares out along the base, this is going to get light. But this side of it, with the light coming down, her body is going to cast a shadow out across the ground down there. So we'll paint all of that dark. Okay, we're almost done with putting shadows on the cloth. The back of her right arm, want that to be shadow as well. And that's going to cast a little shadow underneath the hand, so we'll just kind of put a little scoop of paint in there. It's going to be a shadow where those two pieces of cloth meet. And then under there, like where she's got the cloth raised, that's going to have a shadow underneath it too. Now, keeping in mind that that light is high over her left shoulder, it's not going to hit directly in there. So under there, I'm going to put a few brush strokes pulling this dark paint around the bottom of the curve towards the shadow. And this is something I'm going to say a lot. I'm going to be talking about the brush direction. Whenever I put a dark paint over an area which is lighter, I move the brush strokes towards the dark. When I'm putting a lighter paint over a dark paint, I move the brush strokes towards the light. Now, that's not super relevant right now, but when we start doing lighting effects, it's going to suddenly become very, very important. So just get used to the idea now that when we put dark over light, pull towards the dark. When we put light over dark, we pull towards the light. All right, so this little tombstone here, let's just comment on the base, right? So the lighting effects are going to be on the base as well. So we might as well just put in some big shadows right now. We can see we got our light direction coming from over there. And so her body is going to cast a shadow over most of the base directly away from that. Okay, it would come down like that across the base. All right, so we don't have to paint the shadow on the base or on the plastic rim of the base, but we definitely want the ground where that shadow would be cast to become this dark blue color, this blue-black color. And by doing this at this stage, we're giving ourselves nice, strong shadows. And if I was to go and try to paint white paint over those now, say I put white paint on those skulls and white paint on that shadow, this is going to look lighter than that, no matter what I do, because that paint is going to show through. Same thing on this tombstone. I'm going to put a little shadow, because the light is high up there, so the bottom of that tombstone is going to get a bit of a shadow on it. So I'll put a bit of shadow on the bottom. And these skulls are going to have a shadow around them. Well, those might be flowers. I'm not sure. Yeah, let's assume they're going to be dead black flowers. Dead flowers. And we got a skull there. And a little bit of stone. We'll put a shadow behind the piece of stone. And this kind of step by her foot is going to cast a shadow on itself, because of where the light is positioned high over her shoulder. Like that. And that's probably enough shadows added for now on that side. Let's take a look at the other side. So same idea. This tombstone is not getting the light directly, so we're going to put that whole side of it in shadow. It's going to be casting a shadow, so we'll make a little loop of paint underneath it for the shadow, in the same direction that we made the shadow of her body. This dress is going to have a shadow under each of these loops. And I think maybe this stone right here is going to have a shadow under it. So that gives us some nice strong shadows to work with. Okay. Now I gotta figure out how to mute. There we go. We'll mute all the servers, so we don't get lots of beeping noises. Okay, there we go. So our burgundy wine should be nice and dry by now. So let's start building up that lovely skin tone. So what we're going to start with, we're going to take a little bit of burgundy wine, just a touch of it, move it out of our reservoir down on our palette here, and we're going to put a big old dollop of that ghoul skin color in there. I want it to be slightly more ghoul skin than burgundy wine. That's about what I'm looking for. So bear in mind it's going to dry darker than it looks in the palette. I think I made that a little bit too light. Put some burgundy wine back in. There we go. That's what I want. Don't want too much of that on my brush at once. Actually, I'm going to mention something now that I noticed when I was doing a one-on-one class. A lot of people tend to load their brush by dipping the brush straight down into the paint and pushing the tip into the paint. And that works. You get paint basically on the tip of the brush. But what I'm suggesting we do, because we're not thinning with water, we want to really smooth the paint out and load the paint with the brush with paint. If you can see the gold words on my brush, okay, as I load the brush, you'll see them roll by a couple of times as I roll the brush. So I'm rolling the brush quite a bit in the paint to smooth it out first, work out any lumps, get it thoroughly mixed, but it's also putting the paint kind of homogeneously through the bristles. The other thing is the angle of the brush. You can see the brush is at a very low angle to the paint. It's not coming straight in, it's coming at a low angle. And what that means is that when I roll it, the excess paint comes off the tip of the brush. And I get that nice, I'm not going to be able to see that till I go back to the other view, but I get a nice smoothly loaded brush. Let me switch the view back. So that brush is smoothly loaded now. If I come down straight into that, I get a blob of paint. See the blob of paint that's shiny on the tip of the brush? That's basically just straight paint. So when I go to put that on the Mini now, I get a blob. And you can see that blob actually has a raised texture. Okay, there's a raised texture to that blob. And that's because the paint is on the outside of the brush, not in the brush. So when I go back and I roll the brush, get the paint smoothly loaded, work out all the lumps, all that good stuff. Then when I go and put the paint on the Mini, I actually have control over how much paint goes on. You can see that's a lump, and you can see the way that it's drying, it's got a texture. That went on smoothly, even just the same sort of dab of paint. So try to load your brush smoothly, roll it at a low angle, keep the point on it, and avoid getting those big lumps of paint on the brush. Okay, so back to painting the Mini. So essentially this color is going to go everywhere that skin tone is getting the light directly. The light is on the top left shoulder, so I'll try to make my brush strokes go in that direction. I'm going to start on the knee, going to work from the bottom up, so that my brush strokes go towards the light. There we go. And I pull up along those surfaces to put this color on. Now, don't completely cover the burgundy wine that we already put down. We want this to go kind of lap over the edge of the burgundy wine a little bit, but don't cover it over. If you are not getting a perfectly smooth layer at this time, it does not matter, because we're going to be doing a similar color to this several times. We're going to be doing at least 5 more steps of skin tone. So it doesn't need to be perfect at this stage. We'll do the same thing on her right leg. Brush strokes going upwards. Pull towards the light. If any of you remember that Baldur's Gate video game, it always helps to remind yourself to pull towards the light, boo. Go towards the light, boo. Hope somebody got that reference. Anyway, I'm working on her shoulder now. I'm going to have this area kind of a little bit highlighted. So brush strokes pulling up towards the crest of that shoulder. Same thing on the other arm. This one's going to be quite a bit brighter, but same idea. Brush strokes going upwards. This is her right arm we're doing now. So to respect kind of the idea that the highlight is where the light is going to hit the surface, we want to make the highlight not be any larger than about half of the visible surface. When we get to the lighter highlights, we can start to encroach a bit and make the highlights smaller. But at this early stage, we want these highlights to go right to the edge of the area that the light would hit directly. So we'll do her chest now, and you can see the top of her chest right in there. We want to keep that shadow. So we'll pull away from that shadow forward. Make sure we keep the edge of that, because that's the shadow cast by her hair. And then I'm going to turn around and go the other way and pull the paint forwards off of her chest and meet up with that other area I just painted. There we go. Similarly, I don't want to lose that dark shadow that we put in the middle. So I'm going to, same thing on the other side. Now for her face is a little bit more difficult. Still not too bad. This light is coming this way, so it actually is going to reach most of the way across her forehead. So I'm going to start about 2/3 of the way across her forehead, so about kind of right over her left eye. I'm going to pull my brush strokes from there towards the light across her forehead. And that bit of gray underneath where I'd done a zenithal highlight is probably going to show through, but that's okay. We're going to do more coats of paint later. I'll do her nose the same way, this cheek, and that eyelid. Don't worry about it if you can't hit the eyelid. We don't want to paint her eye. We want to keep that dark color in her eye uncovered. Okay, and same thing above her mouth. Same thing on that cheek. We're going to do her chin the same way. Pulling towards the light. Now we're going to break the rules a little bit. And even though the top of her other cheek is not going to get the light directly, we're going to put this color on the raised part of her cheek anyway. And that's a little bit dangerous because that area might get hit by some of the light from the other side. And if it doesn't look right, we can fix it later. But for now, I want to get a little bit of that color on her, this color on her other cheek. And that is all the flesh tone. Oh, we left out the part on the middle of her back. There's skin in the middle of her back. We're going to do exactly the same thing in there. Don't completely cover the shadow. So particularly where the cloth meets the skin, we don't want to cover that shadow. There we go. Okay, so there's that color done. Now, because we went systematically, we started that left leg and we worked our way around and then did the face at the end. This part is dry now, so we can just go back. We're going to grab that ghoul flesh, and without mixing anything into it, we're going to do the same highlights again in exactly the same way. So this is the nice strong foundation for our lovely undead skin. Start with the knee, side of the leg, and work towards the light. Don't completely cover the previous color. You're going to cover a lot of it, but don't completely cover it. And we don't want these highlights to creep past that line that we laid out. Okay, where that light doesn't hit and we're into the shadow side. Because if you start to go too far, when we do our backlighting, we don't want the backlighting to spill out onto the areas that are lit from the front. Or from the main light source. Same thing on the other leg. Don't completely cover the shadow. Don't completely cover the previous layer. Brush strokes from the bottom to the top. There we go. Now we'll do the arms. I don't remember which arm I started with. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to start with this left arm. Now this little bit of her arm at the top might get a bit of light. It's unlikely, but we're going to put that, like the side of her bicep can have a little bit of a highlight. If we don't like it, we can get rid of it later. But this part of her shoulder, we're going to give a nice highlight to. And this might be as light as this gets in this area. But we kind of need a highlight here so that her overall shape will be visible. If we don't highlight this, then the natural reflectiveness of the paint is going to create a highlight there for us, whether we like it or not. And that might kind of go to war with the highlights we're going to make ourselves for our backlighting and our main light effect. So we're going to take control of things by putting our own highlight there. And that's generally a good idea anyway. If you're going to be doing object source lighting or highlighting and shading and all that on a Mini, you're taking control of the way the light looks. And if you're going to do that, control all the light. Don't leave it up to the natural reflectiveness of things to try to give you natural highlights. It won't work. They'll kind of fight with the ones you've painted. So on the arm facing light, we want to make sure we get a nice highlight on the bicep, right up over the shoulder. And then we'll do the same thing, go from the opposite side of the shoulder and pull down. The main highlight is going to be right about there on her shoulder. So I'm coming from opposite directions towards that. Because as we know, wherever I lift my brush, that's where the strongest highlight is going to be. So pull towards where I want the light to be. There we go. Nice big highlight. I think we did her back last, so we'll do her chest first this time. Same thing on the chest. Now that shadow on her chest is going to be quite strong, quite sharp. So I can kind of go quite close to the edge of that, but don't kind of cut into that shadow that we made. And I'm going to pull the paint outwards, but not right out all the way onto her breasts, because we want to come from the opposite direction to pull the paint out to make those have a round highlight. So I come out part way, then I'm going to turn the Mini around and go from the other direction. So my shadow side is that side, so my brush strokes are going to go from the edge of the cloth towards the light as much as possible. Same thing down here. Now, because of our light direction, there's going to be a stronger highlight on this part of her chest. And on the other part of her chest, the stronger highlight's going to be in the edge of the cloth right there. We just want to keep that in mind as we go forward, where those highlights are supposed to be, so that they're logical when we're done. Let's go to the back. And I think this part of her back is not going to be super brightly lit. We'll just give it a little bit of a highlight on the raised part of that back muscle. We'll leave the shadow along her spine and just a little bit on the other side. And now we're on to her face. I want to check to make sure that so it's quite dry here at the moment, so the outside edge of my little area of prepared paint here might be drying out. So before I reload the brush to go onto the face, where we don't want it to be kind of chalky paint, I'll just double check that the paint is still quite fluid. Mine is quite dried up, so I'm going to clean my brush, make sure I get most of the water out of it. If not, I want most of the water out of that. I don't want to create a flood. And then I'm going to get a little fresh dollop of paint and reload and start again. Now there was a tiny bit of water on that brush, but not too much, so it should be all right. Okay, now I'm ready to go back and do the highlights on the face again. So as you remember, we did the forehead, and the highlight on the forehead is going to be quite close to her temple. But this highlight is going to still cover about 2/3 of her forehead. So I'm going to start over her left eye and pull towards her right temple. Like that. Try not to overbrush it too much. I'm going to go up like that and across like that. So the lightest area is going to be around there. Most of it's going to be in her hair. I'm going to hit that eyelid closer to the light source. You don't have to if you're not comfortable with that. And now we're going to do the side of her nose and the round part of her cheek raised towards the light. a little bit more of that cheek, I think. So I'm going to extend that highlight a little bit further down. I want to get it on her upper lip and that side of her chin. Now, I'm a terrible one for when I'm painting faces, going back and trying to refine it too quickly before the paint's had a chance to dry, and always tear the paint up. So we'll kind of slow down there a bit. And I want to hit this highlight on the opposite cheek as well, the cheek that's just away from the light source. Just the very top edge of that cheek. I want to get this highlight as well. There, like that. Going in the right direction. Okay, so now we're going to go to our next skin color. Now normally when I do these, oh look at that, I made a huge mess. Normally when we're doing these classes, I'll take time to pass the mini around. I haven't been doing that in these online ones. Just kind of keep going, but I usually try to go slow enough to make sure people have time to keep up. So, you know, if somebody's watching the video later, they can always pause it, but you folks that are painting along, please don't hesitate to let me know if you need me to slow down or wait if you're not ready for the next step. Okay, don't be concerned about that. We got loads of time to get this done. So I'm taking my next lighter color for the skin tone, mixing just a tiny bit of the previous darker color with it. So it's kind of a half step between the two. It's not really a half step. It's lighter than a half step. But it's your choice how many steps you want to make, right? I'm not planning to do half steps with the final two colors. But you could have a half step between each of these, which would make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 steps in your skin tone. I don't think we need to do that much for her, but that would be the general idea. Okay, so for this one now, same idea. I'm going to start with the leg again. Did I miss anything before? I did not. So this highlight is going to start at her knee. Don't cover over everything we did previously. Want to leave a little bit of the side of the knee has a little bit of a shape to it. It's all right. A little bit of a shape there. And then we're going to go up that part of her thigh. And the edge of this highlight is going to come right up against the shadow from her skirt. But it's not going to cover all of the highlight that we already did on the rest of the thigh. It's only going to cover about, I don't know, 60-70% of that, something like that. So we want to leave a little bit of that previous highlight showing. And then we'll fill in the space in between that we just made. Okay, so there's the highlight on that leg. Same idea on her other leg. This shadow at the top, this highlight's going to come up to that shadow, but not cross it. And we're going to start like 60% of the way down her leg and work her way up. But don't cover all of the previous highlight and don't cover the shadow at the top. There we go. Look at that. We're going to do her left arm. I think just a little bit of this highlight at the top of that muscle. That's more than enough for there. Probably too much. The top of this shoulder, just the very top of that, I'm going to do like a little star shape where I pull the paint in towards the center. This little star shape. Create the highlight on the top of her shoulder. Again, probably too bright. We can always fix it later. Working on her right arm. That round shape of her bicep's going to get a nice highlight on it, but don't completely cover the previous highlight. This is going to come right up to the edge of the cuff, but don't cover the shadow. And then we pull upwards. And the sort of round shape of her shoulder there, the center of the highlight is going to be kind of about there. Okay, so we're going to pull the paint in towards that point from the outside to create that round shape. A nice bright highlight in the center. There we go. Okay, there's her arms. On her back, I don't think that light's going to hit there at all. So that's dark. That's light enough for the back part of her, for her back. And then the next thing is her chest. Same as before. That shadow right there, we don't want to cross that line. The shadow of her hair, so we'll put a nice bright line along the side of that. And then bear in mind what I said before about the position of those highlights. The highlight for her right breast is going to be right about there in the cloth side. So we're going to put a little bit of a highlight where her breastbone would be, the sternum there. And then we're going to pull up the paint along that round shape to meet the rest of the highlight there. And then on the other side, that highlight is going to be right about there. Make sure we get that clear. Right about there. That's the center of the highlight on the other side of her chest. So we'll pull the highlight in to that point. There we go. And now we're going to do the same thing on her face we did before. We'll do the forehead. Check to make sure our paint's not drying out too much. And going to start a little bit closer to the right side of her face this time. And exactly the same as before. Pull up right up to the edge of that hairline. Slightly smaller highlight on the tip of the nose and along the side of the nose. You can do her nostril, the side of her nostril separately. That one eyelid again. And then we're not going to connect the highlight on her nose to the highlight on her cheek. We'll do this separately. Give a nice round highlight on that raised part of her cheek. And then we want to get the side of that little cupid's bow above her lip. Now these are delicate brush strokes. If you're not comfortable with that, don't attempt it. Side of her lip there, and then I'm going to do a little bit on the side of her chin. Now I'm trying to be careful not to cover over her lips because we've already got her lips essentially the color we want them to be on the darker side. We can go back later and put in a highlight color. There we go. That's how her face is starting to look. And I think I do want to hit the top of that cheek again on the dark side of her face, just a little bit. Now you're starting to get very close to where you would hit her eye, and we don't want to hit her eye. Just be a little bit careful about that. Okay, so there's her face. All right, coming along pretty good. Now, as I said, we're just going to jump up to the next color. This is maybe too much of a jump. I don't really care. I'm going to go brighter. I've still got 2 steps lighter that I'm going to go, right? So I'm not too worried if I make it. I should say that. It's quite likely that I'm going to have a sharp, visible line on my highlight when I put this color on. And if we do, what we'll do is we're going to glaze with the mid-tone to smooth over that edge. Okay, so if you do get that sharp edge, don't be too concerned. We're going to take a step to smooth it out. Same as before, start with the knee. That little round piece of the knee gets that round highlight. That That little muscle down there I think needs to be highlighted as well. And then same as before, the edge of this brush stroke goes right up to the shadow. But we don't want to cover everything that we did before, so we're not going to cover that whole previous highlight. And the brush strokes go upwards, but not all the way to the clothing. Almost all the way. And then we do the other side of that brush stroke, or sorry, the other side of that highlight, and work our way up. Now you might be wondering, why did I do it this way? Why did I paint the skin first instead of painting the clothing first? Well, it's because this is the exact same sort of sequence we're going to use to do the white cloth. And a lot of people find that painting white is a bit intimidating. And we're getting rid of that by using the same technique for the skin tone and for the cloth. So I'm doing her right leg now. Same pattern. Now earlier I said that the highlights on the shoulders were already too bright. I think they are, so we're not going to highlight her left shoulder again. We are still going to highlight her right bicep. And then the same thing as I did before, I'm going to put that mark right where I want the highlight to be on her shoulder. And I pull the lighter paint into the center of that highlight, making like a round shape out of her shoulder. Then I'm going to connect that down to the highlight I put on the bicep. My brushstroke direction goes in towards the center of that highlight and the center of the bicep. Sorry, the center of the shoulder. Oops, I'm losing my mini. There we go. Looking pretty bright now. Okay. Chest is next. Now, we're starting to get towards our last couple of highlights, so this is going to start to get quite a bit smaller. Now, there's a little bit of her collarbone. Oh, sorry, I'm off screen. There's a little bit of her collarbone. That would be right about there, just on the near side of that cloth. I'm going to make sure that's, there we go. Right about there. So I'm going to put a little dot for that highlight on the collarbone. And then I'm going to put a little brush stroke going towards that from the side. So from this side inwards towards that dot. So there's her collarbone. Then we've got the sternum is right in there. I'm going to put a little highlight in the center where the sternum would be. Okay. And then as I did before, we know that that highlight's going to be high on her right breast. So I'm going to put that highlight up there. But I'm not going to follow it all the way along. I'm just doing the center of those round highlight shapes now. There's one. And the one on the other side is going to be kind of, so there's the center of that highlight that's going to be in the cloth. So that one needs to be positioned similarly on the other round shape on her chest right there. Just like that. And we'll pull that light in towards the center of it. I went a little bit too far and I covered over the edge of the shadow, but I can always go back and fix that later. Okay, there we go. There's that bit of chest done. And now we're going to do the face. Same idea as before, smaller highlight this time though. Maybe only about half of her forehead this time. Now she's pretending to be all friendly and innocent, right? If she was malevolent, I'd give her some like facial creases and things to make her look kind of scarier, but I think she's trying to kind of lure victims in at the moment, so we're going to leave her a little bit calmer face. So we do the tip of her nose, the raised part of her brow, that little eyelid again, and the highlight on the cheek this time quite small. I'm going to come in once from the right and once from the left to bring the highlight towards the center of the cheek. And then I do the same thing as last time, get a little bit of the nose, the cupid's bow, a little bit above the upper lip, a little bit on that part of the chin. And I'm going to go and do that mark on her other cheek, but now the light's coming across, so I don't want it to be there. That's going to be in shadow. I'm going to put this highlight under the corner of her eye on the opposite side of her cheek, as though the light's coming across this way and just catching there. There we go. Now she's got a good vampire-looking face on the go. Feel pretty happy with that. Yep, definitely. Okay. And now we got one more color to do in the skin tone. Now I'm going to make sure I don't have any chalky chunks. I don't know if you can see that. There's a lot of chunks of dried paint starting to build up on brush. So I'm going to give that a quick clean. Just rinse it with water a bunch of times. That's what I'm looking for. Make sure the water's all out of it. And then I'm going to I've got a drop of water on my palette. I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't want that in this. So I'm going to grab a daub of creamy ivory. There it is. And I'm going to roll it, make sure it's nice and smooth. Make sure my brush is not overloaded, and make sure I get a nice fine point on it. And then we're going to go back and do, these are our second lightest highlights on the skin. We might go back at the very end and use some pure white on the skin, but for now, this is as light as our skin gets. So we don't need, these are going to be very small highlights by comparison to what we were doing before. So the one on our knee is basically going to be 2 little dots. We know that this is the overall round shape of our skin. It's a little bit shiny, so I'm not going to put this right against the shadow like I did before. I'm going to have this just a touch in on the away, more towards the shadow. Leave a little bit of that previous highlight between this highlight and the edge of the cloth. And I want this to be fairly small compared. There we go. Okay, so there's that highlight. And you can see that the lines of the previous highlights are all still visible there on that side. They're not so visible on this side. And that reflects our light direction. Same thing for the other leg. Start low down, and you should be able to see like a little series of triangles now of light, of progressively lighter colors as you work way up. There we go. There's the highlight on the other leg. Again, we're leaving that arm. And now we're going to, oops, got some white paint on my fingertip. Now we're going to do the other arm. The other arm, this highlight on the bicep, we're going to make that a little bit rounder shape this time, and we're not going to connect the two together this time. So this one is going to be like a little round shape. Almost like your bicep has its own little highlight. And then I'm going to do a highlight on the top of her shoulder and that same spot again, right in the middle, that meaty part of the shoulder. Pull in from the outside. Get nice and light in the middle. Still don't need any more on her back. Wouldn't hurt to do a little bit of a highlight at the top of the tricep there. Don't necessarily need to do that, but why not? Makes it look a little bit more, I would say natural, but that's not exactly the best line of anatomy. And now we go back to the chest again. So the chest, remember we had that collarbone. So I'm going to put a dot of this on the end of the collarbone, but I'm not going to do a line leading up to it. A little bit on the breastbone there. Just a couple little dabs of it, not too much. This, the right breast, gonna do, let's get a light up here. Pull the light paint along the side of the shadow of the cloth, not covering it, but I'm pulling towards where I know eventually this highlight's gonna be on that cloth. And then on the opposite side, little round highlight, a couple of millimeters in diameter, right where the skin is going to be most reflective. Now on mine, I managed to tear up the paint, so I'm going to put another daub of paint in there to cover up the damage I just did. There, that's better. And now we're on to her face again. The forehead, we're going to put a round highlight, kind of about half of her forehead, right up to the edge of her hairline. Eyelid again. Small round highlight in the upraised part of her cheek. Side of her nose, tip of her nose, tip of her lip, and that's it. Just like that. And that's enough for that. Now, this is the color we're going to use for her eyes. So we're going to do a two-step eye, same as we did the last couple of times. I guess there was no eyes on the guy last week. But what we're going to do is, right now you've got her entire eye socket is burgundy wine. Now that's perfect. We're going to put a white dab of this creamy ivory on the side of the eye socket away from the light source, and that's so that it looks like she's looking in that direction. So she's looking towards her right. And this tiny little dab of paint just goes right in the corner of the eye. If you have a nice detail brush, now is the time for that. I probably should have switched. Let's see if I can see that. There's the first one. Do the second one now. Oh, way too big. Look at that. But we have the idea that she's looking off in that direction. Now, how do I fix that mess? Well, I'm going to switch over, I haven't used it yet, to my fine detail brush. Slightly smaller one with a better point. I'm going to grab my burgundy wine. Get a nice fresh load of burgundy wine on there, and I'm going to fill the eye socket back in and do it again. Not every day is a good day to paint eyes, but you should always paint the eyes. Just try to find the right conditions to do it. If anybody's taken my Painting Eyes a Secretly Easy class, that's like lesson point number 1. All right, so I'm going to redo the dark color in the eye socket completely. There we go. Got a little bit of it on the upper part of her cheek. I'll fix that now with a bit of that last highlight color. Can you hear the panic in my voice over painting eyes? The right answer is no. It's not a big deal. Make mistakes painting eyes all the time. And we just fix it. All right, so I line up the brush to the mini. And this is my highlight color coming back in to fix the daub on her cheek. There we go. And now I'm going to put in that little bit of daub of paint in for the whites of her eyes. It's assuming the paint doesn't actually dry up on me at the tip of the brush. There we go. And now she's got eyes looking off to the left. No, to our left, her right. And that's good enough for me. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I can live with that. I think the last thing we want to do is going to be the lips. So in the meantime, let's do a quick glaze over the skin tone. Actually, let's not. Let's let the skin tone dry a little bit, and we'll come back to that. How's everybody doing for skin tone? Is everybody up to the same spot that I am? Or do you need a little bit of time to get that part finished up? Excuse me. Nobody screamed at me. That's a good sign. I'm going to check the other stream, see how things are going. Okay, no problems there. All right. Now, if you wanted to take a moment, go ahead and take a photo of your mini. If anybody wants to get feedback at this stage, you're more than welcome to chuck a photo of your Mini in the chat. And if you have any questions or you want any feedback, this is a good moment to try that. I am going to keep going. The next thing we're going to do is basically the exact same thing again, but with a series for this this stuff in the place in the palette. Clothing. So I've got my indigo, black indigo. Get a bit of a dollop of that off to the side, and I'm going to grab some of this stone gray color. Why am I using the stone gray? It's a warm gray color, and my plan is to make this white look kind of shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from this cold blue indigo to a warm stone gray to a cold blue to a warm stone to a cold white. So I'm alternating colors, but I'm also going up in value as I go along. And what that's going to do for me is create a lot of contrast. So the cloth is going to look a little bit more like a shiny white color than just a plain white color. So with my kind of half-step mix of indigo and stone gray, I'm going to start painting all the cloth. So I'm going to start with the boots. I'm going to start at the bottom and work our way around, same as we did with the skin tone, okay? I'm just going to check my focus now that I've got like my painting position perfect. Okay, that's pretty crisp. And away we go. So we'll start with the boots. The boots are going to have that shadow alongside the cloth. We don't want the highlight to go too far in there. And I'm just going to kind of dab this on. I don't want the boots to look smooth. I want them to look a bit rough. So I'm just going to dab this on, but I'm not going to cross over into my shadow zone. And I'm going to let this color get on the laces as well at this stage. Not too concerned about preserving that dark line that we've got kind of going on there already. Not too worried about it. Next. This is stone gray. Yeah, we're working with the stone gray. But it's a half mix of stone gray and black indigo. On the cloth out here, I'm going to start low down. And I know from looking at it like from that angle, right, that my light is going to hit there. It's going to hit along there. It's going to hit along here. It's going to hit most of this area down here. But there's going to be a shadow from this piece of cloth on a line right about there. So that's where I'm going to stop filling in with this color. And these brush strokes are going to go upwards. Now I'm going to try not to hit the lowest areas that are already in shadow, like this little crease which has already got the dark paint inside it. So I'm going to try to miss that with this color. But I'm only going to be painting on the light side of these shapes. So in along the side of the boot here, we're going to leave that in shadow and just paint on the areas that the light's going to basically hit directly. Okay, so there's the lower part. Now, this bit of cloth in here, right, is going to get some light coming from the back, so we're going to leave that shadowed. This piece of cloth over here is going to get some light on the inside, so we're going to put a bit of a line of color down there, like that. And then what are we on to? The gloves. We'll do this glove. Paint the fingers. Paint half the glove facing the light this color. And then this part of the cloth down here is It's going to be lit from above, so we're going to start down here touching the edge of the black indigo and pull upwards towards our light source. Remember, we got that shadow in there from the hand, so we're not going to cover that over, but we're going to go right up to the edge of it. Brush strokes upwards. And the edge of this black indigo should disappear under this paint. So we can't really see that hard edge of the indigo anymore. It's affecting this paint, it's making it appear darker, but it doesn't look like a sharp line anymore. And then we'll do the same thing in here. We want to leave that sharp edge of the shadow there from the wrist. But then in here, in these round areas, we want to pull the paint across the edge of the indigo towards the light. And we're going to pull that. Now, normally I would say pull the brush strokes that way, but it's very difficult to do. So we're going to go in under the arm here. And we're going to pull away from the light, and then we're going to pull from the shadow towards the light to meet that color. There we go. Then we're going to start down here somewhere. This is about where that shadow is going to be. Sorry, the light can kind of glint across there. So this is not going to be quite as dark. Shadow from the cloth is still visible right there. We don't want to cover that over. And as we said earlier, that shadow there is kind of dark, but then out towards this it flares. Flares outward so the light will catch it. So we're going to paint this color right out to the edge of the cloth. How are we doing time-wise? Not too bad. There we go. Now the other arm on the other side in here, that's not really going to catch the light, but I'm going to cheat and put a little bit of a highlight of this color on the inside of the glove, facing towards our primary light direction. And that's just to help work against the light coming the other way, so that the secondary lighting effect is going to work. And we're back on the front. So we need to do, actually we left out this part of the dress in there. So we're going to do that. I'm running out of paint, so I'm going to make some more. There we go. Okay, I missed that part of the glove there. So in here, we don't want to completely cover that shadow line. So we'll go up to the edge of it, and then we'll pull across this round shape, leaving that shadow between the corset and this little skirt unpainted. And then this is the other side of that highlight we did behind the body, and I think we're going to need a shadow in there at some point. So let's do that. Let's paint this part of the corset coming away from the light source. We don't want to cover that shadow from her breast, so we'll leave that in place. We want to leave that shadow as well. So we'll paint that half of her front of her corset, and then anywhere there's a raised edge, we're going to go a little bit further away and then pull in. So I'll extend this highlight out onto those ridges that go out towards her hip. Because they're raised, they're going to catch a bit more of the light. Okay, there we go. And then top of the chest. Now remember we said that there's the brightest highlight on that side, so our highlight, this highlight is essentially a ring around that shape on the cloth. Same with the other one. That main highlight is going to be right on the center, right up there. So this color goes around that in a ring shape. Shape of the highlight in this case matches the shape of the object. And I'm going to try to fix that mistake I made right there. Put a little bit of this color on the edge of the cloth. There we go. What else do we need? This glove, the left glove. Again, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to put a highlight on the inside of that glove towards her body, like that, and that's to help make it look more sensible with the light coming from the outside when we do the glow effect. Okay, are we pretty much there? Okay, so that's our first color of white. It doesn't look like it's going to be white now, but you just have to trust me. This is going to be white cloth. Now, I said we were missing a shadow, and the shadow we're missing is from her arm along her body in there. So I'm going to grab a bit of indigo and put that shadow back now. So basically, there's my light source. I'm going to line up the light source with my overhead light. And from my overhead light, I can see the shadow would be right about there along the side of her body. Right there. So I just added that back in. And at the back as well, just re-emphasize the shadow. It lines up with the shadow we made for her hand. Okay? And there we go. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think she's going to have black hair. Black indigo hair. So since we have black indigo on the brush right now, let's paint all of her hair black indigo, but don't cover over the red that we've got there completely. We want to basically have that red in the shadows, like it's reflecting her skin tone, okay? But everything else we're going to paint black indigo. Do all the hair. And I think once the hair is done, at least this first coat on the hair is done, the skin would be dry enough to do a bit of a blending glaze on it. So that's what we'll do. We'll go back now and do the glaze on the skin tone. After we do this. Oops, sorry, I keep drifting. Getting there. Okay. Skin tone glaze. So the color I'm going to glaze on the skin tone, I think, is going to be this middle one. This one right here. Okay, I'm going to put a little dollop of that off to the side. And I'm going to thin it down with some water. It's going to be quite a chalky color. We might not like the way this is going to look, okay? And that's fine. That happens sometimes. The key thing is that when I apply the glaze, I don't want it to end up pushed over top of darker colors. What do I mean by that? So when I put my glaze on, I'll do it on my thumbnail first. If I see those dark colors there, if I pull the glaze across and lift my brush on the dark color, I get a white dot over the darker color. As that dries, it's going to make a coffee stain. Here's the coffee stain. Just use the brush to lift the wet paint out of the middle, and it's going to leave marks like that on our dark color. So what we want to do is pull the glaze across and have it land on a light color. So like say my thumbnail here is a lighter color. I'll pull the glaze across the surfaces that I want it to lay on, leaving just a little bit. But when I get to the end of those brush strokes, instead of leaving the paint out in the open like that, I'm going to go far enough that it ends up on top of something almost the same color. So that the coffee stains end up being on top of something lighter colored, or the same color as the glaze, okay? Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. You could glaze this. We could glaze this, in fact, with the Burgundy wine, very, very thin, and give her overall more reddish tone. I find that would be, I think that would be a little too red. So we're going to do it with this mid-tone. And the idea is don't let it flood in the crevices. What we're aiming to do is pull it off of the shadow into the light zone without flooding in the edges. So I'm going to orient my brush and my mini so that I can move across smoothly, and my brush strokes are going to end on the edge of the highlight here. Okay, so I come out of the shadow and end my brush strokes on the edge of my highlight. I don't want to flood this with a lot of paint that goes wherever it wants to, pulled by the surface tension of the paint. I want a controlled amount of paint so that I can control where it ends up, so that it dries with that extra bit of paint on top of something the same color, so I don't get the big coffee stains. Do the same thing on the other side, taking care not to cover my shadow. And the final brush strokes are going to go up the middle of that. And as that dries, it darkens, and that's going to smooth out some of the irregularities in our layering. So this would be a glaze, a layering glaze, or blending glaze for our layers. Sorry, blending glaze for our layers. Same thing on this leg. I want the highlights to end up. Oh, put a big dab of that on her arm by mistake. Well done. I'm going to come up her leg this way. Pulling the lighter paint from the shadow onto the lighter area and avoiding having it end up where it's going to make a coffee stain. There we go. Same thing on the arms. Start in the shadow and make my way up the arm. So this mid-tone is quite a chalky paint. This is going to be a little bit of a challenge to control, but that's worth practicing. So there we go. Brush strokes going from the shadow across the edges of those rough layers, and then depositing that paint in the lighter area. Now, if this doesn't smooth out enough, what do? Well, we do it again. And the reason we do a very thin layer is so that we control how dark it's going to get, and if we don't end up accidentally making it too dark. I'm going to do this on her back, which has never had this color on it. I'm just going to do a very tiny dot of it across the back to where I want that lightest highlight to be on her back. Do the same thing on the other side, just a tiny bit to lighten that skin up a bit. And I feel like that's enough. Do it on her chest as well. I'm going to start up by that collarbone and pull the paint forwards. Pull it out of the shadows and across her chest into the edge of that shadow. Pull it from the shadow out to where that highlight is on the front of her chest. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side, pulling it out onto that highlight. Up from that shadow in her cleavage, up onto the round part. There. And then we'll do it on her face. Same idea. We'll start on the shadow side and gently put that layer of paint to smooth that out. Now I don't want to go too far down because this paint could be kind of chalky. Just do a little bit across that shadow, a little bit on her lip, a little bit on her chin. There we go, and work our way up. There. Pretty happy with that. Okay. Our first coat of paint on the other side, or for the white cloth is probably dry, but I'll just check in with you guys. Is everybody keeping up all right? Okay. All right. We're going to start rocking quickly through the cloth now. We already know where the highlights are going to go on the cloth. We don't have to map that out anymore. I'm going to use straight stone gray, and every time we apply one of these highlights, we don't quite cover over the previous highlight. Okay, it's as simple as that. And I'm going to work systematically from the right to the left, and then spin the mini around as we go to make sure we don't miss anything. So the first spot is going to be inside this part of the dress here. We have that shadow, and this is going to go right up against that shadow. And I do my brush strokes from the bottom towards the top. There we go. Done. This thumb is sticking a bit further forward, so I'm going to put a little bit of this stone gray on the wrist and then out onto the thumb and the top of that first finger. That is more than enough. This little bit of her dress here, it has those little raised ridges. So I'm just going to catch them, and my brush stroke should have gone the other way. Because I'm putting a light paint over dark, we pull towards the light. There we go, that way. So I'm going to change the orientation of my mini so I don't make that mistake again. And I'm going to work along this bit of her corset now. So there's that little raised edge. Work our way forward, little raised edges, and when I work further forward I can connect all these separate little highlights. Okay, connect them together into a single highlight as I get closer to the light source. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, bearing in mind we don't want to fill in that shadow. Leave that shadow there, and we're going to hit the whole side here. Leave that kind of zipper, or what would you call that, like the stitching. We don't want to fill in the shadow in the stitching. And work our way right to the left. Now we've got that shadow under her arm. It ends there. So this highlight's gonna start at that line and work back and connect with the rest of the highlight on the front of the corset. There we go. Sorry. Okay, this piece of cloth here, same idea. There's the edge of our shadow. Edge of the shadow is there, so this goes right up to the edge of it. And I'm going to leave that shadow along the edge of the cloth. Work our way up to the edge of that, but not past it. There we go. Down here, same thing. Well, let's do the boot first. Do that little bit of trim at the top of the boot. And this boot has like a plate of leather that the laces connect to. So I'm going to highlight that first. And then I'm going to separately highlight the rest of this part of the boot. So there'll be a little line between those two panels now. Okay. You can see that little line there now. And that piece of leather goes as far as that. And then we've got a separate piece of leather here for the toe. There we go. And then I'm going to paint the sole of the boot. A line like that out to the tip of the boot, but not on the shadow side. Now some of these details might not be the most clearly visible. I'm not even sure if those are correct, So I kind of made it up as I went, and that's totally fair with these figures. Okay, needs a bit more stone gray. And now we're into this center piece of cloth. We've got a strong shadow at the bottom, so we're going to go right up to the edge of that. I'm not going to cover the entirety of the previous highlight. I want to leave this indigo. So my brush strokes are going to go upwards. I'm going to make sure I don't completely cover the shadow in that little fold. Go up along the side of that piece of cloth there. Okay, and then do the same thing in this larger piece of cloth. Brush strokes going upwards from the edge of that shadow. So this is the foundation for our white. And by building up the value, so a series of progressively lighter paints, so we build up a pyramid of progressively lighter values. By the time we get to doing the final white highlights on top, we'll be able to just slap that white on there and it's going to look like it's in the right place. As opposed to if we tried to paint white directly over a black primer, or we tried to use the white as our mid-tone or something like that, that doesn't really work. You've got to give the white a solid foundation for it to work. There we go. Okay. Oops, grabbed the wrong paint. Let's do the chest now. So the chest here, we know that highlight, we want it to be right about there. So I'm going to put that highlight on and just make a round shape, fairly large, but not completely covering over the previous highlight that I put in there. And that's going to be the same process going forward. Each of these is going to be progressively smaller. A little bit of the trim. This color. And that dress has a bit of trim that goes along from her collarbone, out along the front, like that. And then we want to highlight that round shape separately from the trim. Really bring out the details in there. And now I'm going to paint each of those bits of lace from her corset there separately. The same color. There we go. What are we into now? Gloves. Do the same thing on the gloves. I'm going to paint her fingers individually. And I'm going to have this color not completely cover over the previous one. My brush strokes are going towards the top of the glove to create that really strong highlight. Do the same thing on the other side. Push it forward. And then I'm going to join those two highlights together in the middle. And the brightest part of this highlight should be kind of pointing towards that arrow, right? There's the arrow, so it's going to be about there is the brightest part of the highlight. Top of the hand. Do we miss anything? Nope. Okay. This part of the dress down here, same idea. We're going to have brush strokes going upwards. Extend a little bit further down, anywhere that's got a raised surface. Like this little crease is a little bit of a raised shape, so we extend it a little bit further down. Pulling upwards. We're not going to cover over the shadow that we carefully made last time. Working our way up. Okay. This area in here, this is going to be highlighted towards the edge. So the edge of the highlight is going to be where that shadow lies. Right there, and it's going to be a sharp line. And then we're going to pull from away towards that. So as we put the darker paint over the light, we're pulling towards the light, but we stop abruptly at the edge of that shadow line. And we'll do the same thing on the other side, but we're going to leave more of this previous shadow color exposed. I'm only going to cover about half of that. Because the light can't travel around the corner. Just going to gently illuminate that there. Okay. It's not going to get too much of this down here. It might get a little bit of the cloth there, but that's about it. Okay. But down at the bottom, it's going to get most of that area that's protruding past our light source. Sorry, out of the it extends out of the shadow. So we're going to paint most of this stone gray. Bearing in mind that we've got another light source over there, so we don't want to go past that ridge. It's about as far as we want to go. All right. And this zone over here, not going to get much of this at all. But I'm still going to cheat a little bit and put a little bit of a highlight on the back of that arm right in there. Just a little bit. There we go. Have we gotten everything we need to hit? Yes, we have. Okay. So with that map really a lot more visible now, we are going to go and just hit the snow shadow. Snow shadow, we're going to be going from a warm to a cold color, which can look a bit weird, having the cold color as the highlight. But this is the plan.
I don't know that.
Good to know. All right. All the same places again, noting that the light's that way, so away we go. First highlight inside of the clothing. And we brush strokes in the direction of the light source. Down here, we want these ones to be quite a bit smaller on the hand. So quite a bit smaller than the ones we did last time. I'm going to reorient and not make that mistake I made before. These ones, only about half as long on this kind of hip. And really just catching the edges of those raised shapes. Same thing here. We're going to start a little bit further in from that line. So it'll be something like that. And working our way up to those laces. And I do want to get right up to the edge of that shadow line under the laces. So I'm going to reverse, use the sharp tip of my brush to get in there and highlight right up to there. Now I think I'm going to create a fake hem here now, just by putting that line a little bit sharper along there. I'll match it up with one along that edge. And then when I connect these highlights, I'm not going to fill that whole space in. I'm going to leave a little gray line. Create a little bit of a fake texture there. I'll do the same thing on the other side. On the other side, we go right up to that shadow line. Okay? And we'll start it the same way. We'll start in between the threads. We're going to make our line on the jacket with the corset there. And then when I go to continue filling this in, I'm not going to go all the way up to that. I'm going to leave a little slightly darker line unpainted and create a little bit of a hem shape. And this one, as we know, goes right up to the edge of the shadow. So along we go like that. And then we fill it in. Let's work our way up onto the top of this now. So up here we got the same thing going on. We need to be putting a little bit of a highlight up at the collarbone. This is on the trim of the corset. We're going to work our way along that trim, but not all the way to the bottom. We're going to start making a more pronounced highlight on the raised area there. We're going to ignore the other side. And then the center of that breast like that. Give it that round highlight. On the other side, reverse the direction of the mini to make it easier. We're going to catch that bit of trim up here. And then round highlight just down from that piece of trim. Like that. Okay. And now we are on to the boots. We're going to do that piece of trim. Do along the side of that piece of leather that we kind of created there. Right down to the front of the boot. And I'm going to do the ends of those laces now. Paint those separately with this color brown. And this cuff edge at the top of the boot, I'm going to do that one again just to really emphasize it. And then we want to do the toe. And this highlight we want a little bit smaller than the previous highlight. Do that sole of the boot, same idea. And then in there we've got a little bit of like a raised shape there. So we'll highlight that separately from the leather around where our ankle would be. There's a little bit of a crease in the leather above that. And then the rest of this we're going to do like it's a smooth, unblemished piece of leather. There. Give it some shape. All right. Now, we are into this piece of cloth. Now, this piece of cloth, it has a sharp edge there, but the light source is quite high up. So we don't want to bring this blue color right up to that edge. I'm going to start about a third of the way up, around there. And I'm going to highlight upwards from there. And that's because it's on an angle to the light source. And it's not going to be such a sharp shadow anymore with this color. So my brush strokes are going to be going from here up towards the light, creating a bit of a gradient on that piece of cloth. And I'm going to go right up to the top on these. There's a little bit of a fold up there, so I'm going to pick that out. I definitely want to keep that other fold separately. And then I'm going to connect these all together. Oh, way too much paint on my brush. Okay, start with there and work my way up. Meet up with the other highlights that we started from above. There we go. Good enough. We want to extend that out onto this piece of cloth over here, where it lines up with the same light source. I'm not going to go all the way to the top because that shadow is going to come down to about there. I want to line those up though, like that. This zone in here, sharp shadow still. Work our way up to the edge of the cloth. This highlight's going to be quite big, almost right out to the edge of the cloth based on the direction that the, like its orientation to the light source. It's going to really be quite light colored. There we go. And now we got to do the glove, the fingers all separately done. Okay. Brush strokes going upwards. There's a bit of a round shape where her wrist is pushing against the glove. So kind of mark that separately in there. And then this highlight just goes up the length of the glove. Remember what I said about the highlight being closer to the front. See this, how we've got the highlight closer to the front of the bicep? This highlight kind of lines up with that one. Okay? Because the light is a little bit more to the front than to the back. And then we're going to leave more of the previous layer showing on the shadow side. And we'll connect them all together. All right. It's coming along pretty good. Now we need to do the back. Get some fresh paint on the go. Alright, so back here, same idea. We want to catch just the most raised areas here, right up close to the shadow. The hand is casting a shadow down there, so we only want to go a little bit of the way up. The outside of that curve on that piece of cloth. And that's just about enough, I think, on that area. Because the light's to the front, don't forget. I think we do want to catch a little bit of this down here. Because that kind of flares out a little bit. It might get caught a little bit in the light. But not all the way to the top. Something like that. So the light's going to catch that as it comes down. And then as we look down at the bottom, okay, see how that all lines up? We're going to line this up down here. A bit more blue. There we go. All right, how are we making it? We're doing perfect. Okay. This zone up here is not going to catch very much of this light, just a little bit. And it's mostly going to be on the side towards that this shadow. So I'm just going to do the raised areas of the cloth up over this hip. Okay, see what kind of connects with this highlight here. This is the light which is making it past her shoulder. Okay, I think if we did that, we wouldn't be wrong, right? Catch a bit of that leather there, and maybe just a touch. Yeah, let's do it up to the edge of this line along her the back of her dress. I think that's enough. That's enough. Maybe one more. There. Okay, I like it. I like it. Do we want to do the back of this arm now? I think no. I did it anyway, but we'll see how it looks in the end. And I think that is all of the color for that layer. So let's go right on to the next one, which is going to be weathered stone. And we're going to do all those same highlights again, smaller than the previous ones. And we don't have to cover much area, so this will not take us very long to do. Always keep in mind our light direction is up there. And about 2/3 of the remaining space gets this color. A little bit on that cuff. We go to this hip now. Really don't need much of this on this hip. Just a touch there. Close up to that hem. Oh, sorry, I drifted. Right in there. And then we're going to start further down. Along like that. And then we're going to fill in about half of this remaining space with this color, which means that this is going to be, this zone over here will be almost all this color. Fill in about half of that. And remember that anything which has a fold which is a little bit longer will extend it a little bit further away. And I have my mini the wrong way round. I should be doing these brush strokes in the other direction. And at this point you can all easily tell me why. You can see those bright dots of paint out at the end. That's what we're trying to avoid happening. So we'll turn her around, we'll do each of these strings, the trim, and then we're going to work our way up onto the hip. Now I'm not going to go all the way to the shadow anymore. I'm going to start a couple of millimeters in from the shadow and line it up and link it up with the highlight I just did. So start just a little bit, leave just a little bit of that blue showing at the edge. Okay, and then we're going to connect that up. Still want to preserve that shadow on her chest. There we go. I'm going to do this up on that bit of trim. Now, you can see how these highlights are starting to line up. This highlight lines up with the one on her skin. We're going to go one color brighter on this, so this should be just a little bit bigger than the largest highlights that already exist on her skin. Okay? Same thing on the other side. And where are we now? Boot. We need to do the boot. Top edge of the boot. Top edge of that trim. Along the edge of that piece of trim. Try not to cover most of our texture the way I just did. Work our way up in there. Round shape on that ankle, the toe, and the sole boot. Okay, and then on this piece of cloth we're going to leave about that much again. Okay, so we'll start about there and work our way up.
Geoff, could you just confirm what color are you doing right now? Was it
Oh,
weathered
sorry,
stone?
weathered stone. Weathered stone. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Okay. And then a little touch of that in there, not too much. This hip. Now remember, we didn't push this all the way to the shadow last time. No, we did, but up here we didn't. Sorry. Up there we didn't push it all the way into the shadows. We'll do the same thing here. Not completely covering over the blue. And like that. Okay. Fingers and gloves again. This time really focusing on like the knuckles. Any shapes that might be more visible, like the knuckles might be a little bit more visible than the just the smooth parts of the glove. So like the ends of these fingers might get a little bit more like that. Okay, just to make them stand out a little bit as a shape. And then a little bit on that wrist again. Sorry, the wrist is right there. And then we're going to do a line of this highlight right up the middle of the blue that we did before, covering almost all the blue, but not quite all of it. Reverse the mini and go the other way. Okay. Backside, we don't need much of this color at all. In fact, I would say maybe only on that corner right there do we need that. Touch there maybe, because not much light is going to come past. My brush is getting all dried out. Let's clean that up a bit. All right, down at the bottom where it flares out, we're going to hit it with this out here. I feel like I want to put some out here, but I really shouldn't. So I'll restrain myself and I won't do it. Okay? So if we look at it from above, no, I think it would catch just a touch there. So I'll put a little bit of this color in over the blue from the last step in there. Not too much. And if you make it too light, you can always go back and correct it later, right? There we go. Okay. So now we're into white. We want to save the lightest pure white for the brightest spots that we're going to make. So we're going to make a 50-50 mix of this white and the weathered stone. And as soon as you put this on, this is going to start to look like it's white. Now, one of the tricks of either painting white or black is you want most of the surface area that you want it to look like white to be painted white. Okay, so we want these raised areas of the dress to look white. They're mostly going to be white. So about half of it on this one going to be white. About half of each of these remaining spaces. Okay. On the dress here, get the orientation right. About half of the remaining space is going to get this color. In here, each of these laces gets its own little highlight. And starting in here, we want to go take the little edge there, which is not getting this color. We want it to be pretty small. Okay, and then we reverse it and bring the brush strokes back the other way. Really making sure we get close in around those laces, but not all the way up to them. We want a little bit of a shadow left. We don't want to cover over our little texture that we created. There we go. Starting to look white. A bit of trim, same idea, but this is going to be the same diameter as the brightest highlight that we did on her chest before, so look for that other highlight to guide you about how big this should be. Okay, same thing with the one out here. Should be about the same diameter as the one that we did earlier. Same on this side. And on that edge of that trim. Okay. I feel like I want to redo that little line along there. I'm not really happy with that. I want that to be a little bit lighter. Okay. Now we want to do, what do we do next? The boot. Top of the boot. Top of that bit of trim. Top of that little uppermost piece of leather right there. We don't want to do that all the way down. We just want to hit the upper round shapes around the ball of the ankle a little bit to make them stand out. And in around here, where the light is going to catch it a bit better, we'll highlight that as well. But not all the way to the bottom. And then the tip of the toe, we'll put a little triangle of white on the tip of the toe and right on the tip of the sole there to make it stand out. And then each of these laces gets a little dot on the side closest to the light. Make them stand out. That's going to be good enough. And then in this zone in here, we're going to cover most of that previous color with this white. Going to go about halfway down with this color. Brush strokes always going upwards. Right up to that shadow line. There we go. And that bit of trim. I'm not sure if it is a bit of trim, but that's the way I'm thinking about it now. There we go. This bit of the hip in here. Trying to hit slightly more raised areas in there now. But right up, line it up with the other highlight on this bit of the corset here. Okay, looking pretty good. Knuckles, just the roundest part of the knuckles at the top are going to get this. Oop, big daub where I didn't want it, whatever. Top of those knuckles. Center of this stripe we've been making. Bear in mind we want it a little bit closer to the front. So there we go. Reverse her and do the same thing again. There we go. And I think that is good enough on the back, so that's just the cloth for the front. Now she has a choker on, right? And I think it's up to you whether or not you want to do anything with that. I'm kind of inclined towards not. I think what I'll do is just give it a little bit of a highlight with that second darkest color. So not the straight indigo, but one up from straight indigo. And I'm just going to try to hit the raised shapes of that choker, which right now are painted burgundy wine. I don't really want them that color. I want them to be the color of the dress. But they're right in the shadow, so I don't want to make them too light. Just enough to make them separate from the skin and separate from the hair. Okay, you should be able to just about see them in there now. Just a little bit of a shape, okay? All right, and we've saved our pure white for last minute highlights, and I think that's good enough. So now last thing we're going to do before we start doing backlighting is the hair. And at this point the hair should take about 3 seconds. So we get a daub of the indigo. We mix a daub of pure white into it. It's about 2/3 indigo, 1/3 white. And we're just going to highlight the hair, same as we did everything else. Now, with the hair, I'm looking for the outward curving shape. So that's the outward curve there. The convex shape. And I'm not worried about the hair texture. I'm just putting a round highlight on the round shape of her head. These pieces come down a bit along, like in a straight line, so I'll give them a highlight. I'm treating this as a bit of a cylinder now, this whole shape. So I'll give it all a little bit of a highlight. And then this piece that goes down between her shoulder and her breast, that has a convex shape as well. So I'll give that a little bit of a round highlight. And where else are we looking? This bit of hair under her chin. Give that a little bit of a highlight where the light might catch it, but not much more than that. Good enough. And now the crown of her head, she's got a part. So I'm going to paint this on the, wrong paint, on the outside of the part. Another little kind of round shaped highlight. And we're going to give her a bit of a halo effect, okay? Make her hair look shiny. Good enough. Round around the crown of the head. Like that. Okay, this is not going to show up the greatest until we do the next 2 layers. So let's just bash on with it. Grab another dollop of pure white and put that into our mix. It's going to lighten it quite a lot. It's about half white, half indigo now. And you notice it's more of a purple color than this snow shadow, which is definitely a blue. All right, and now on the crown of the head, same idea. Remember, our light source is up there. So this highlight is going to be just a little bit down from there. So we go around the crown, making like a little bit of a halo shape. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm still mostly ignoring the texture. Treating her hair all as one shape. Down here, it's got a little bit of a convex shape, so this is going to get the same highlight. A little bit of hair there needs it too. There we go. In here, under her chin, where the light would pass through, we'll give that a little bit of a highlight. Not too much. And then we're going to do around the back of the head. And we're going to make it narrower on this side, not quite such a big highlight. A little bit more of a convex shape there, so we'll give that a little bit more attention. It flows down over her shoulder. There we go. And finish going around the head, but we're going to be going much closer to the crown now, because remember our light source is on that side, so we're going to be bringing that halo much higher. It's like the halo is oriented kind of that way. So the halo comes all the way around and links up. There's our little halo shape, okay? One more big dollop of white in there. So now this is mostly pure white. And what I'd like you to think about now, because we're almost ready to throw our light source on, our secondary light source on, okay? Our main light source is pretty much there. Now we're going to throw a secondary light source on that dark side. So think about what color you would like to see me put on there, and we'll have a little chat about it before we do it. Too much paint on the brush. Let's dry that off. Reload. And I really am trying to make this quite a tight highlight. I'll do it on this hair by her breast first. Where our highlight is there on the breast, we want this highlight to line up with the shoulder and the breast. So I'm going to pull down from the top here until it lines up. Okay, and then I'm going to pull up from the bottom. And if I need to make it bigger, I'll extend it. But for now, I want to just kind of try it out. Is that big enough? Yep. Is it in the right spot? Not quite. It needs to go down a little bit further. There we go. So now these highlights on these round shapes line up, and that lines up in a curve with a highlight that goes down her hip. Okay? We do the same thing on the highlight up around her halo here. We want this a little bit closer to the top than the bottom. So I'm going to go around, pulling down. And if you want to, you can start to pay attention to the texture. I'm not really paying attention to the texture at the moment, except in that my brushstroke direction matches the texture direction of the hair. Okay, and then I'm going to go from the bottom up, keeping it a little bit closer to the top than the bottom. Yeah, that's what I want. Down here, same idea. Closer to the top than the bottom. And I'm not going to come quite so far across this time. Maybe about as far as that. That's enough. And then tighten it up by pulling up from the bottom. There we go. I think we need to connect it a little bit across there, so I'm not sure how I want to do that. I'll just put a few extra little bits that go further up. Let's just show that there's hair there as well. Oops, sorry. But if I do too much of that, I'll lose the effect of the shininess of the hair, so I don't want to do that too much. And now we're going to go around the rest of this halo effect. Almost right at the crown of her head. There we go. And link it back up all the way across. I bet you can all guess what we're going to do at this point. That's right, we're going to put more white in there. We want this to be almost entirely pure white with just the barest touch of the indigo in it. Just slightly off white. And we're going to do those highlights again, but much, much tighter. And not everywhere. Like, I'm not going to do it in here again. That's good enough as it is. But in here, this one has got to line up with the shoulder and the chest. Very tight. Back here, same idea. It's going to be much smaller. Good enough. This one needs to be tiny. To fit inside the previous one. Lots of little tiny brush strokes. Working my way around that halo effect. Tiny, tiny little brush strokes. There we go. And then, so that's enough for that. Remember I said we were going to save pure white for those most important moments. Well, this is the first of the most important moments. So we're going to use the pure white, mixed with anything. And I am going to pay attention to the texture now. There's two ways to do that. One is to like dab it, almost like you're doing an edge highlight across the texture. And this mini has pretty good texture. It's not quite enhanced enough for this to work. So instead I'm going to do little dots of white, keeping it in line with the shoulder. And then working my way across on the most outward rounded parts of those shapes. And then I do that on the crown as well, on the little halo effect. This one I am, again, following the sculpted texture of the hair and working my way around. Don't need very much of this down here. The back of the head, really. Just need enough to convey the light direction and keep working my way around. All the way around back to the front again. And the best ones on the front, I'm going to do them again, make them really bright. There we go. Now, if you're feeling very, very sassy, you can put white reflection dots in her eyes. I'm feeling sassy, so I'm going to, don't recommend this if you're a beginner, but I want one little tiny dot there, and one little tiny dot there. There we go. And that just kind of gives that little extra something to her eyes. Don't do that if you're not feeling comfortable with it. And I think the last touch to do is on the white cloth, we're going to use the pure white to bring up the highest highlights on the white as well. So that's going to be that brightest one on the chest, trim on the chest. I think this line on this glove deserves a bit of extra bling. There's going to be a line of pure white along there. Daub on the two knuckles closest to our light source. I think we'll do it on this line that goes along to her hip. We'll do pure white in the center of that, on that bit of trim, and then up the side of the corset like that. And this is where the camera starts to freak out, doesn't know quite how to handle that. And then this bit of the front of the dress here, that little bit of trim. Let's do the corner of each of the laces, little dot on the corner of each lace. Really kind of bling it up. And I think the final one will be in this piece of cloth here, just about a third of the cloth at the top. We'll get this color. Just to really make it look bling. Okay, there we go. There she is. Now, we are ready to give her a creepy looking back glow. And you're probably all looking at the clock going, holy mackerel. But at this point, we've all worked our way through building up those layers. And we're going to do exactly the same thing to build up the color for a back glow. So as I show you that now, you can probably clearly see where the layers are built up, right? You can see the red. Okay, same thing on this side. You can probably see those layers of blue pretty clearly now. So, what color would people like to see? Let's have some input. We can do creepy orange, creepy red, or creepy blue. Anybody have a preference?
Use your platypus that you like. The platypus teal.
No.
I thought that was the one you liked.
That's a superwash. So I'd rather not use that superwash paint because it behaves quite differently. And I'd have to tell some, I should teach you something new. So we'll avoid that one. But if you like the Phantom Glow, we can do the Phantom Glow. Yep, okay.
Sure.
So here's what we do. The Phantom Glow, let's throw the Phantom Glow on the palette. Big old blob of it up by the big blob of white we got there. I forgot one thing. I'm going to do it now. I forgot to do the red on her lips. So I got that little daub of red in the corner up there. That's going to be a daub of red paint on her lower lip only. Let's get that done quick before I forget again. So I'll orient the mini to the brush. Not too much paint on there. Make sure I got a nice sharp tip on it, which I don't. I'm just going to lower the brush in towards that upper lip. Make that daub. I'm not trying to cover the whole lip, just the center of the lower lip. And you remember we did that burgundy color on there at the start. So that's like the liner around the makeup. And of course I made it way too big. So I'm just going to fix that. Very good. Maybe let's pretend it looks like blood, shall we? All right, let's get a bit of creamy ivory and we're going to do a highlight on that lip. Mostly because I made a red blob too big, so we have to do a highlight. There we go, that's better. And where we've done very, very bright light from her side, we'll give that lip a white highlight as well. Tiny little white highlight on the lip. If you're not comfortable with doing tiny white dots yet, don't try this. There we go. Okay, she's looking pretty good. All right, Phantom Glow. All right, so the color we did in our shadow was burgundy wine, and it was burgundy wine and indigo. So what we're going to do, we're going to take, this is not 100% the right approach, but we're doing it anyway. You're going to take black, and now this black is darker than the indigo and it's darker than the burgundy wine. It's just my start point color, and I'm going to mix into it my daub of this blue. What's that going to do? It's going to lighten it as well as desaturate it. So the blue is nowhere near as bright as it used to be. And you can probably guess how this is going to go, because you've seen me do it 5 times, 3 times already. We're going to put a layer of this color first in any area that the off-screen light would hit directly. And we know where those are going to be because we made a map at the start by putting all of our shadows in. All right, remind you, there's our arrow. There's our super dark shadows that we made. So literally all we're going to do is think about where that light source is down here, think about what's it going to hit, and then we're going to put this over about half of each of those surfaces. So let's start with something simple. There's her fingers. We put this on those fingers where they're holding the cloth. On the lower part, pointing towards the light source, not on the top. Okay? That glove in there, the light's going to hit that directly, so we paint about half of that with this color. Is this light likely to hit the bottom of that arm? Maybe not, but I'm going to put a dot of it there anyway. And will it hit this lower part of her hair? Almost certainly there's going to be a bit of that. So in the center of that dark area, where we didn't highlight at all, I'm going to put a little highlight of this blue color. just a little bit. So that's that arm done. This zone in here, this is quite a bit closer to the light source. So I'm going to paint a bit more than half of it, the light color. I'm not going to go all the way over to where it connects with the white. I'm going to leave a strip of black between this color. So I'll leave a strip of shadow color around this color everywhere. I never want to connect this to the lit areas on the front of the Mini. Okay, so there's my shadow on that piece of cloth. We've got this piece of the dress down here is quite close to it, so we're going to paint a highlight on that as well. But I will not connect it to that white part of the dress over there. There we go. And lighting effects don't work if you don't include the base. So this part of the base is closest to the light. And remember, we mark the outside of our shadow, right? This light is not going to be as bright as our main light source. So we're only doing what I'm describing inside the shadow from the other light source. So right in the middle in there. Okay. And now we're looking everywhere else that we need this. So where else do we have deep shadow? This part of the dress here we missed earlier. There we go. This boot. The bottom part of the boot's not going to get hit, but this part up her calf will. So I'll put a highlight a little bit further up her calf there. The back of that calf muscle is probably going to get a bit of light, and the back of her thigh, deep in the shadow there, is going to catch a little bit of that light. So I'm going to give that a little bit of this color. Now, because I made this desaturated with black, right? It might not be quite the right color, but you could do a mix desaturated with burgundy wine just as easily. If you use something other than black, you have to be a lot more careful about the color theory, though. So just kind of keep that in mind if you experiment with this. Now, looking at it from the shadow side, I think this hip's going to catch a bit of light, and the bottom of the hair is going to catch a bit of light. So there we go. Bottom of the hip. Bottom of the hair. Now we're underneath this, so that there's going to be a highlight on the bottom of this breast. We don't want to connect it to the other highlight, so it's going to be a very small round one right on the bottom in the shadow. Coming across, it's going to catch the other one just a touch right underneath. And that's kind of pushing it. That might be a little bit too much. Coming up this way, it's not going to catch underneath there, but it is going to catch inside this zone in here. So we're going to do just a bit of it in that zone, like that. Where else do we think the light's going to hit? Maybe inside this fold of cloth. We'll just do a little bit of it in there as well, just a bit. If I think it's going to hit in there, it's probably going to hit the bottom of the boot too, so let's do that. There. Now we've got the light shining. Why not? Yeah, that was definitely wrong. Doesn't matter. We'll call it artistic license. Okay, so now everywhere that the light could hit at the back, I think we need to do a little bit on that hip under there as well. Sorry, under here. A little bit on the back. Okay, now we're there. So that what we've done is basically put our first highlight with the mixed desaturated color. Now we take our super saturated blue and put a dab of it right in the middle of that. The black is still too strong, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this off to the side, add another dab of blue into it, so it's probably like 3/4 blue now. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. It's mostly our electric kind of blue color, and you can probably guess where we're going with this. We're going to do this color again in the center of all the highlights we just did. We've got our map. This is not going to take very long. We'll start with the knuckles again. And now, because we know where our light source is, we're going to pull the brush strokes towards the light source, which means we're going down. Okay, going down. A little bit on that. There. A little bit under that muscle. A little bit in the center of the highlight we did on the hair. Doesn't need much. This side we did a little bit on that dress. Doesn't need much there. And then in here we did quite a big one, so we'll do a good bit of that in this color. Right down around those curves, like that. Bottom of the dress, same idea. And again, really important not to directly connect any of this to the lighting from the primary light source. Okay, this all needs to be separate from that. Okay, so that was our hair, was up there. Now we need to reverse the shape of the mini or position. We'll do the bottom of that rock. We're going to do all this zone inside the shadow. This is our light source over here. But again, it can't be inside the area hit directly by the light. So it has to be off from that. There we go. A little bit on the boot. Again, smaller highlights each time. Just consider that we're going to do 2 more highlights in each of these spots, so give yourself a bit of room to work. If you need to make the highlights slightly bigger, that's something just to consider if you don't have enough space to work. But you got to do it by starting with that darker color, enlarging it, and then reapplying this lighter color. You can't just use this color to make it bigger. You got to give it the proper foundation first. The lower part of the hair. We got that highlight under the breast there. We'll do that one. Do that one. And I did make a mistake. I didn't put any of this on her face, which we will. And this zone in here is going to get quite a bit of this. Probably enough. What have I forgotten? Have I forgotten anything else? No, just the side of her face. Okay, so I'm going to clean my brush off, go back one color, reload, and I'm going to do a little bit of this on the back side of her face. So the bottom of that cheek's going to get a dot, and the bottom of her chin just a little bit. Not strictly speaking logical, but it's going to give us that creepy glowing effect that I want. Okay, clean that off the brush, go back to the second mix, and reapply those lights on her cheek. Okay, like I said, not strictly speaking the most logical, but it's going to look cool. All right. 2 more layers to go, then we're done. We go back to our Phantom Glow color, and we're going to use this without thinning it, without desaturating it by mixing it with white or mixing it with black. So it's straight saturated color. And same thing again, but now I'm really making sure that I'm focused towards close to the light source. Okay, so the light source is strongest down here. So the outsides of all these shapes are going to get hit by it directly. They're going to be the lightest from this and the brightest with this color. Okay, so we'll start down there. These edges of this dress here are going to be close to that light source, so they're going to be quite bright. The center of these earlier highlights, same thing. Sorry, I keep drifting today. There we go. And bearing in mind where my light source is, that's why my brush strokes are going in that direction. This part of the dress in here, in there, is going to get this pretty well. So I'll do a brush stroke on that. This area in here is going to catch quite a lot of that light, so we'll start up by the fingers and work our way down. I lied, there's 2 more layers after this one. I lied, sorry. And then a glaze. Okay, there we go. Okay. The bottom of the knuckles. Just a bit on that wrist. The bottom half of that one on that sleeve. Just a dab on that muscle, not too much. The hair is quite reflective, so we're going to put quite a bit of that in the middle of the hair. And on the back side of her hip here, not too much, just a touch. Okay, a few spots left to go on the front. So this boot, am I on screen yet? There we go. Yeah, there we go. Trim of this boot. There we go. That little bit of calf muscle along the back of her hip, or sorry, her thigh. There we go. Just a touch on that bit of the dress there. Bit on the hair towards the bottom. And then just a dab on that cheek. And a tiny bit on the chin. Bit on the breast. And on the other side. Okay, and we need some more now in there. Not too much, just a bit. Okay, there we go. Now, we need to bring up the value in the areas of this closest to the light source. So now I'm going to take some pure white, mix it with the blue. And this goes in the center of the highlights closest to the light source. So that is going to be down here. All these little rocks and things. Quite strongly lit up by the light. Gravel. Don't be tempted to try to dry brush this. It won't work. It won't look right. Just dot it on. Doesn't take long, as you can see. The edge of this dress, right in the center of those strongest shapes. The edge of the dress. There we go. Now we don't want to do this everywhere. We're just doing it where the light is strongest. So if our light is about there, it's going to be quite intense in a ring about there. But when we get an inch further, it's going to be half as bright. So this is really going only in the areas closest to the light source. And we got one step lighter to go. And those ones will just be like right up close to the light source. Okay, that's a good one. Then tips of the knuckles again. This curved piece of cloth. It's going to get some of this. Okay. This piece in here is close enough to get a bit of extra bling. And I would say a little bit on the hem of that, or the trim of the boot. on the lower part of the boot, and definitely on that pointy toe of the boot. And that's probably enough of that. Okay. And then we go to pure white. We normally reserve pure white for the center of light sources, reflection dots, things like that. And what we're doing in this case is we're going to put the pure white in the center of each of those shapes I just made, but then we're going to glaze them back down from pure white so that they will look like the reflection areas closest to the light source, but without actually being possible to mistake it for the light source. So we just do a bunch of these. Aiming for the center of those shapes that we just highlighted a second ago. I think maybe, no, that one doesn't need one. That needs one. That needs one. That doesn't need one. I think these knuckles do. 1, 2, 3, 4 knuckles. That one does. Maybe that part of the boot. Part of the boot up there. Let's do that too. Knowing that we're going to glaze it back down again. And definitely need to do it in there. There we go. Okay. Okay. Now, we're going to, I gotta wait a second for that to dry. I'm not super happy with that zone in there, so I'm actually gonna make a darker mix, and I'm gonna paint over it because I think it's too bright. Just give it a couple of seconds for this other area to dry before we glaze it. So I'm gonna put that in there. Darken that back down again. Yeah, I'm much happier with that. Much happier with that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Should be dry enough now. We're going to glaze it with our light color now. So I'm going to grab some of that blue. I'm going to mix it about 2/3 with water. 2/3 water, 1/3 blue. And the aim here is to bring back the color saturation of the blue and to tone down that pure white that I just applied. Okay, so let's start up here on this bit of the sleeve. I'm going to glaze that from the shadow towards that blue dot. I'm going to let this color dry on top of that dot that I previously made. There we go. Same thing on the fingers. I'm going to bring it from the shadow down across that blue on the tips of the fingers. And the white is going to show through this, right? So I'm not too worried about making it too dark. The main thing is I don't want it with coffee stains now in the middle of that white. So I'm going to start at the top and I go right to the bottom with this blue, push it off into the shadow, and I'm going down towards the light source so that most of the blue ends up towards the light source. And then I'm going to go back the opposite direction and have the blue dots end up in that zone between the pure white and the band of blue that I painted earlier. So my dots are ending up in there somewhere. Okay, and that really brings up the saturation without creating ugly coffee stains. Same thing on the back. Go down and then go up. Down and then up. On the dress, down, all the way down, pull it right off the end. There we go. Do a little bit in there. Way to loosen control of it if I can. On the boot. I feel like I want to do those ones again. I don't know why, but I'm doing it. It's all right. Okay, I'm just being silly now. The last place I want to do it is down over these rocks and things. It's all right. And there it is. Now the camera can't really deal with the blue. It's a very similar looking effect to that red. I wonder if we put them side by side. Does the blue show up a bit better? A little bit better. And that will do. We'll put a black ring on the base, and then I'll pop it off the painting stand, and the camera will stop freaking out. I'll take a still photo as well. We'll post a still photo with the video. I'll just add it into the video. There we go. Pretty much a finished mini. So let's pop her off there. Get rid of that. And there's our kind of a blue glow on the go. And there she is. All right. The survivors get my congratulations. If you've made it to this part of the video, you get congratulations. Any questions from anybody out there? Does anybody want to post a picture and get a bit of feedback?
Here, I'll post something in just a sec.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I'm going to take a picture too, so that you can see what the colors really look like. There is a camera here somewhere. Background. Take a super photo. Oof. A little bit of white.
Jeff, I just posted in all the peeps chat. I just thought I probably should have posted it in the video chat, and I missed.
Okay, I'll go look for that there.
No worries. And my wash from my LED blue was a little strong, so
Oh, that
I'll
happens,
have to
man.
go back
It happens. All
I still
right.
need to actually glaze the skin.
Yeah, no, I didn't do much on the skin either. I mean, I only did one layer of glaze, right? Normally I would go back and do it a few times until I was happy with it. And with all these things, right? Like repetition is useful. Like if you just do it once and then, you might not get it in the balance that you're looking for. So it's always worth doing it more than once.
Sure. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
still
wow.
learning how to make glazes.
Sorry. Nice job, Kevin. That's looking really good, man.
Oh, thanks.
Do you mind if I put
It
that
looks
on?
pretty rough in person.
I'm going to put that on public view. Is that cool?
Oh yeah, sure.
There it is. It's looking really good. Like you say, a little bit heavy on the blue, but the shadows are looking really good. And you can really see the difference that it would make if the base was fully painted as well, right? Like when you get that painted with the stone colors, with a similar
Sure.
contrast as what you've got up here, it's going to look pretty sharp. The highlights on the hair, a little on the large side. Like your final highlights need to be quite tight for it to look shiny. When they're quite large like that, it doesn't look quite as shiny. But the highlight placement is looking really good. The skin's looking good. Yeah, and the blue. I know the camera washes out the blue quite a bit, but that's looking pretty good, man.
Thanks.
Good stuff. All right, let's see if we can get my the photo I just took to show up. It's there. Let's see. Just be a couple of seconds.
I just got another guy last night was asking about like starting to paint, and I'm like, hey, jump on these. And I gave him the link last night, and he messaged me back this morning. I think he'll probably try and start jumping onto the future sessions.
Right on. Very cool. And that's one of the reasons we're recording them as well, right? So that people can do them on their own time. And I know that I can tend to paint a little on the quick side. So it can be helpful, I think, for people if they can pause as they go rather than really fight to keep up with me, you know? All right, let's see if I can find that photo now.
I don't think I ever posted a pic of my first one. We did that very first day. I'll send that to you.
Right on. Okay, so we need to... We don't really need to do anything to that. We just need to zoom in on it. Okay, let's make a new one. And we'll add a photo. Downloaded photos. Image. Okay. Browse. Downloaded images. There we go. And let's try. Can we... Okay. Let's do... That turned out really big, didn't it? Okay, let's crop that. There's the blue glow off the side. Almost there. Gotta love technology, eh? Watching somebody else fumble around with this kind of thing.
Very nice.
Okay, so let's get rid of that. Let's go and get the cropped one. There we go. There we go. There she is.
Looks very nice.
So thanks, man. So the blue is kind of it's a subtle color difference, right? And then this is what I was talking about with the the tightness of the highlights on the hair when they're really big. So the left side of her head, as you look at it right now on mine, doesn't look that shiny, but the right hand side looks pretty pretty blingy, and that's because the highlights are quite tight, right? So yeah, so that's the blue green color there without this camera software losing its mind trying to sort it out.
Looks
All right.
great. Yeah, I see what you mean too about the tightness, especially kind of like. I mean, I haven't done it yet, but I see it's kind of like that. Like I've been reading about non-metallic metal. It's kind of the same thing, kind of like around the cylinder.
Exactly the same principle. Yeah, same principle. And the position of the highlights matters, right? Like they're not directly towards the light source. They're off direction from the light source, and that all comes with time. Let's try something a little silly here. Can we rotate that and see the color? Nah, it's not really going to show up that well.
It starts losing its focus as it's getting different.
Yeah, the camera can't deal with the blue.
Posted a few pictures also in the Discord classes.
Oh, cool. Okay. Was that? I'm sorry, I don't remember what your name is. I know your Discord handle.
L Instruments. It's in the Discord classes. It's in the voice chat type thing. Whatever.
Okay.
So there. I didn't have the undead trio for the flesh colors, so I kind of guessed on those a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The first shade came out kind of more grayish than greenish, I think, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that's cool. Like, I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Like the key is to just have a skin tone that's not too warm looking, and then because the really warm skin tone is gonna not look like an undead, right? It's gonna look a bit funny. Oh, that photo's way too blurry. That one's not gonna work. Let's try one of the other ones.
That one looks my blurry.
Oh yeah, your photos turned out pretty. So to get the clear photos, you need to have a dark background, a uniform background behind them. A piece of paper is better than your desk, if possible. The other thing is, don't hold the mini in your hand. If you can, put the mini down on your desk so that it's stable, and then you're going to get less of a blur. That one's quite a bit sharper.
Okay.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, the highlight. That highlight. Let's see if I can screen share that. That highlight placement in the hair. That's exactly what we were aiming for. Nice and tight. In fact, on that side, you could go a little bit bigger, but that's exactly what we're looking for. That really tight, shiny looking highlight. And the one on that goes across her chest and onto her shoulder, that looks really good, right? That's exactly what we were looking for. It's really good. Yeah. And I like the skin tone, right? That's nothing wrong with that skin tone. I mean, it's almost identical to what we were using. So, well done. Good eye for color.
I think the mid and the higher, the shadow color, 50, but the burgundy wine and the shadow color, first mix, that was a little off, I think. But the rest of them came out pretty good, I think.
You can see that right in there, right? That little bit of purplishness to it. But that's okay, as long as you're consistent with the color, right? And the purpose of the burgundy wine is to be a bit like, the dead blood or something in the flesh that's kind of not moving so much. But you can use a variety of different colors in the same way. In fact, I use burgundy wine or mahogany brown or any of those things for flesh tone almost all the time, right? I just like the way it looks. Yeah, that's come together pretty well, man. That's looking pretty good.
I threw another picture of that blue glow. I think I'm just going to get that posted quick.
Yeah,